Even though I haven't played the latest Resident Evil games, because my wallet is collecting more dust than any fortune, I still consider myself a hardcore Resident Evil fan. Why? Because those games gave me nightmares that haunt me to this day, and I haven't had my revenge yet. How did they traumatize me, you ask? Oh, don't ask me, ask the zombies.
Zombie, zombie, zombie.
Zombies. The only monsters that somehow get uglier with age and still land blockbuster deals in Hollywood. Like, seriously, every actor out there is defying time itself. Who hasn't noticed that Tom Cruise is pushing 60? But even now, he is pulling off insane stunts in Mission Impossible? Meanwhile, zombies? They've been rocking the same crusty, decomposing look for decades, and somehow, they still get top billing. Heck, my boyfriend wakes up looking like a mess, and even he's got more life in him than these walking corpses. Speaking about zombies, have you ever wondered where zombies actually come from? Sure, they became pop culture icons in the 20th century. But the whole back from the dead concept? That's been around since ancient times. And today, we're diving into the grimy, brain-munching history of these undead freaks. From their earliest origins to their, glow up in modern media, and why they just won't stay dead, both literally and metaphorically. From ancient folklore to viral pandemics, we're cracking open the coffin on zombie history. Grab your brain snacks, because it's about to get decay-licious. This is Salty Orca, signing in! Ever wondered where the word zombie even came from? Like, how did we go from reanimated worker to unstoppable flesh-eating nightmare? Well, let's take a dive into some linguistic history. Experts believe the word zombie likely comes from the Bantu word nzambi, which literally means God. The Wikipedia consider them equivalent to Jupiter in Roman mythology, Zeus in Greek myths, or Odin in Norse legends. But thanks to pop culture, that meaning took a wild turn. By the 20th century, books and movies started twisting the idea of zombies, and the meaning gradually shifted. Fun fact, in Night of the Living Dead, the iconic horror film that set the standard for zombie flicks, the creatures weren't even called zombies. They were referred to as ghouls. It wasn't until later that director George Romero fully embraced the term in his movie sequels, cementing zombies as the horror icons we know today. Then along came Resident Evil, which tells the story of stylish gangsters flexing their combat skills against virus-ridden, brainless, helpless monsters. Thanks to this franchise, and a whole lot of other zombie media, the word zombie became a household name. And just like that, what once meant God evolved into enslaved worker, and then into terrifying flesh-eating corpse, and finally, your waifu. A linguistic lowdown? Maybe. Still, zombies might have lost their divine status, but they gained one heck of a pop culture career. Now, how did they end up like that? Before zombies became slow, moaning idiots, or the sprinting, rabid maniacs we run screaming from, kinda like when I see Isho Speed in public, they were something way worse. Aside of looking for human flesh, they were seeking retribution, endlessly. Basically, if you've ever had an ex who just refused to move on, you get the vibe. See? Ancient zombies weren't just wandering around looking for a midnight snack, they were looking for revenge. These undead weren't just dead, they were pissed. They didn't just stumble after you, they hunted you. They weren't looking for a meal, they were settling scores. Putting aside the joke, when I dove headfirst into history's grimy pits, I found out that zombies have been creeping around for at least 4,000 years. Yep, Before Hollywood got its hands on them, zombies made their grand debut in one of the oldest literary works ever, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Well, actually, they showed up even earlier in the Descent of Inanna. But let's start with Gilgamesh, since that version of zombie lore is like the upgraded deluxe edition of the earlier myth. Now, for those of you who totally slept through history class, the Epic of Gilgamesh is an ancient Mesopotamian epic poem that follows King Gilgamesh's emo phase, aka his desperate quest for immortality after the death of his, friend? Companion? Servant? Look, ancient texts are vague, but his name was Enkidu, and their bromance was legendary. Anyway, here's where it gets juicy. The goddess Ishtar took one look at Gilgamesh and thought, "Damn, I want me some of that." But when she shot her shot, Gilgamesh was like, "Hard pass, lady, your dating history is a disaster zone." And instead of handling rejection like a mature adult, Ishtar stormed off to her parents, throwing her tantrum. Well, folks, even goddesses can be drama queens. She threw the ultimate tantrum, demanding that her daddy Anu hand over the bowl of heaven as a way to vent her anger towards Gilgamesh. If her daddy does not comply, she threatened to unleash the dead to rise up and feast on the living. I was like, "Excuse me? Ma'am? That's literally a zombie apocalypse. Ancient Mesopotamians weren't playing." Yep, that was the first recorded zombie apocalypse threat in history. Can you imagine? If her dad had told her no, we might be living in a real-life Dawn of the Dead sequel right now. These ancient zombies, known as revenants, weren't just mindless shamblers. They were driven by vengeance, anger, and a whole lot of "I'll show you" vibes. Sound familiar? Yeah, just like your ex. Again, thankfully, Anu had the sense to comply with her daughter, saving humanity from a very early encounter with the undead, and proving that even gods have to deal with their kids' emotional outbursts. Now, let's jump from ancient Mesopotamia to the cold, brutal lands of the Vikings, where we meet another historical record of the dead refusing to stay dead. Introducing the Draugr, the Norse undead with an attitude. In Norse mythology, Draugr are basically Viking zombies, but with more muscle and a serious grudge. These aren't your slow, moaning, brain-dead walkers. They are more like the buff gym bros of the undead world, typically reanimated warriors who died violently or had some unfinished business. You'd usually find them lurking in burial mounds, guarding treasure, or just being all around nightmares. And if you thought modern zombies were a pain, Draugr could shapeshift, crush people with superhuman strength, and spread disease just by existing. So basically, they were the OG toxic X of the monster world. Now, let's hop over to China, where we meet the Jiangshi, or the hopping vampire zombie. Why hopping, you ask? Well, instead of dragging their feet and groaning, these guys get around by jumping. If you grew up in the 90s, you probably remember these stiff, spooky creatures from Hong Kong horror movies. Or, if you're a hardcore Chi-Chi fan from Genshin Impact, congrats! You've already got a solid mental image. Jiangshi are reanimated corpses that don't just want your brains, they want your chi, or your life force. These ancient zombies are usually dressed in traditional Qing dynasty robes, looking like they just woke up from a centuries-long nap. And their name? It literally translates to stiff corpse, which is both hilarious and terrifying. How does one become a Jiangshi, you ask? Well, one way is getting bitten by one, because apparently zombie rules are universal. You get infected, you start rotting, and next thing you know, you're hopping around in the middle of the night trying to suck the life out of people. Scientists have theories about why the legend exists, but let's be real, Whether it's your ex, a jiangshi, or your Wi-Fi connection, some things just refuse to work properly. Of course, zombies didn't just pop up in Mesopotamia, Viking lore, or China. Nope. The concept of the undead stretches everywhere. Honorable mentions include the Vitala from India, the Naxxerer from Germany, and then there's the Loa from Haitian voodoo. Wait, hold up. The Loa aren't exactly zombies. They're spirits in the voodoo religion, so why are they on this list? Well, folks, that's because the concept of modern zombies doesn't come from ancient myths. It comes from Haitian voodoo. And let me tell you, this is where things get real. If you're worried that real documented zombies are terrifying, flesh-eating monsters plotting world domination, relax. First of all, we have Leon to save us. And let's be honest, with abs like that, he could single-handedly take down the apocalypse. Second, the original voodoo zombies weren't brain-hungry ghouls at all. They were basically, well, unpaid interns. Yep, you heard that right. Haitian voodoo zombies were actually living people who had the absolute misfortune of getting kidnapped, drugged, and buried alive. The process went something like this. Someone, usually a boker, aka a voodoo sorcerer, poisoned their victim with a toxin that made them appear dead. While their poor family mourned and held a funeral, the boker would creep back at night, dig them up, and tell them, "Congrats, you're dead now. Your body is possessed by the Loa. Society has no use for you, so you work for me now. No buts allowed." And just like that, the so-called zombies were forced into a life of mindless labor, mostly working on plantations, completely under the boker's control. So yeah, while modern zombies are all about tearing people apart, Haitian zombies were basically corporate employees, overworked, underpaid, and stuck in a job they didn't sign up for. Now, before we wrap up this voodoo zombie deep dive, there's one very important thing to understand. Haitian zombies weren't just a spooky legend. They were deeply tied to the real fears and beliefs of enslaved people in Haiti. See, Haiti's history is full of struggle, having first been enslaved by the Spanish and then the French. But despite their suffering, many Haitians found solace in their spiritual beliefs, particularly voodoo and the powerful Loa, or spirits. One of the most feared and respected Loa was Baron Samedi, the top-tier guardian of the dead. According to Haitian belief, if you respected the Loa and lived a good life, Baron Samedi would personally guide you from the grave and send your soul to the ultimate paradise, which is heavenly Africa, also known as Guinea in their faith. But if you offended the Loa? Well, that's when things got dark. Instead of being freed in the afterlife, you'd be doomed to eternal servitude, even after death, as a zombie. No rest, no peace, just mindless labor under the control of another. Now, here's where it gets really twisted. According to a professor named Amy Willence, slaveholders, who were often other slaves acting as enforcers or voodoo priests, weaponized this fear to control their people. Enslaved Haitians often saw death as their only escape from a lifetime of suffering. But the fear of becoming a zombie, an undead worker doomed to be a slave forever, kept many from taking that escape. So, before zombies were the gory, brain-munching creatures we know today, they were a terrifying psychological weapon. They were used to keep enslaved people from even thinking about rebellion or escape. Haiti fought hard for its independence in 1804. The slaves, led by their burning desire for freedom, overthrew their masters in a bloody revolution and became the first nation to abolish slavery. But freedom didn't exactly mean peace. Political and economic chaos ruled Haiti for years until 1915 when the United States decided to help and occupied the island. And this is when the concept of zombies started to bloom in America. Suddenly, the concept of people being brought back from the dead to work for free was not just a creepy Haitian tale, it became a mainstream idea in the United States. Some even started studying it. 3 key figures in the creation of the modern zombie are American journalist William Seabrook, folklorist Zora Hurston, and Canadian anthropologist Wade Davis. These 3 contributed to shaping the zombie we know today, all thanks to their experiences in Haiti. First, let's talk about William Seabrook. In his 1929 book, The Magic Island, Seabrook gave the world a peek into the zombie phenomenon, describing them as reanimated corpses, not gods or spirits, but actual undead workers. The book also popularized the term zombie, which comes from the Haitian Creole word zombie, used to describe people revived for labor. This book didn't just scare people. It inspired Hollywood's first full-length zombie film, White Zombie.
Zombies? Yes, they are my servants.
Next up, we've got Zora Hurston, the legendary American folklorist, author, and ethnologist. Hurston, in one of her books, painted zombies as the ultimate forced laborers, having to work long hours in banana fields with barely a break to catch their breath. But wait, it gets even crazier. She came across a woman in a village who had allegedly died and been buried 30 years earlier. And guess what? She was walking around like nothing happened, alive and, well, kind of undead. Hurston even claimed to have photographed a woman, which is the first ever real-life zombie photo. And no, it wasn't a carnivorous, brain-hungry monster or the waifu zombies you've all been simping over. It was just a woman who shouldn't be walking around. Creepy, right? Wade Davis, a Canadian anthropologist, stepped in with his 1982 research. He proposed a theory that some kind of poison from pufferfish and the datura flower could make someone appear dead, but not really be dead. After being declared dead, they'd get buried, only for the Boker, our antagonist sorcerer, to dig them up and force them to work as zombies on plantations. Although Davis's research has been largely discredited, it did push the idea of zombies as the resurrected dead into the public. Davis also helped popularize the story of Clervisus Narcisse, a man who supposedly died, then mysteriously came back to life to work for a Boker. He regained consciousness after the Boker died and returned to his family. Now that's what I call a comeback. While there are stories of reanimated dead across different cultures, Haiti is where the living dead idea truly took root worldwide. Now you might be thinking, okay Orca, if zombies started as forced laborers, how the heck did they turn into flesh-eating monsters? Well folks, the answer lies in none other than your daily dose of mainstream entertainment. Enter Hollywood, where everything gets a makeover, including the zombies. By now, the term zombie has gone through more identity crises than a teenager with access to Tumblr. It started as a god in African roots, then downgraded to an undead intern in Haitian plantations. Throw in some ancient myths, and we start to see a pattern. 1. People raised from the dead for revenge. 2. People raised from the dead for labor. Now, imagine if we mix these two concepts together. Vengeance-fueled zombies and mindless worker zombies. Oh, and just for fun, let's throw in another classic creature of the night. Vampires. What would that give us? Something interesting, to say the least. This bizarre evolution is how modern zombies clawed their way into pop culture. But fun fact, the first ever feature-length zombie film, White Zombie, released in 1932, stuck with the old-school Haitian version. No flesh-eating, no apocalypse, just mindless undead workers toiling away at a plantation, with a bit of romance in it. That trend continued up until the 1950s, when zombies started shifting gears from exploited workers to vengeful revenants, thanks to pop culture gems like Tales from the Crypt and Plan 9 from Outer Space. Then, in 1954, along came a novel called I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. Now, before you say, wait, wasn't that a Will Smith movie? Well, yes, but also no. The book technically wasn't about zombies, it was about vampires. But not the romantic, brooding kind with great hair. These were infected, bloodthirsty creatures who behaved eerily close to what we'd call zombies today. The story followed Robert Neville, the last man on Earth, as he fought off hordes of vampires and uncovered the science behind their condition, including their fear of garlic, sunlight, and the classic wooden stake. This book was a game changer, so much so that it got turned into film adaptations for many years after. More importantly, it caught the attention of one man who would change horror forever. Who, you ask? Oh, just the father of all zombie flicks, the legend himself, George Romero. In 1968, a young filmmaker named George Romero set out to make a horror film on a budget so tight that he and his crew had to rent a farmhouse that was already scheduled for demolition just to have a filming location. But despite its shoestring budget, this little indie flick, Night of the Living Dead, became a monumental success. And fun fact, while the flesh-eating creatures in the movie were never actually called zombies, since Romero referred to them as ghouls, this film single-handedly reshaped what we now recognize as the modern zombie. It's kind of fuzzy how the word zombie ended up attached to this whole undead revenge thing. Basically, Wikipedia says that after Night of the Living Dead came out, and its flesh-eating undead became the image of zombies in America, everyone just started calling similar creatures zombies. It's like how everyone calls tissues Kleenex, even if they're not actually Kleenex brand. Now, zombie is just a way to describe anything that refuses to stay dead. Romero's Night of the Living Dead didn't just scare audiences, it redefined horror. This low-budget flick laid down the groundwork for every zombie movie that followed. From Dawn of the Dead to Zombie 2 and The Return of the Living Dead, the undead became a pop culture staple, each movie adding its own flavor to the genre. By the early 1980s, zombies had officially evolved from brainless, unpaid interns to flesh-craving monstrosities. Still, most zombie movies didn't explain why people were turning into these flesh-munching nightmares. Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Zombie 2 all left the cause of the outbreak ambiguous, leaving audiences to fill in the blanks with their own wild theories. But subtle changes in these films hinted at a shift in the zombie archetype, moving away from the supernatural origins of Haitian folklore and into something more scientific. Zombie 2, for example, never outright explains the zombie outbreak, but there's plenty of talk about virology and radiation, subtly nudging the genre toward a more biological horror.
I've attempted to apply the disciplines of bacteriology, virology, even of radiology.
By the mid-1980s, zombie flicks started losing steam. The genre wasn't exactly dead, but it was definitely limping along like one of its own reanimated corpses. In Hollywood, zombie movies were fewer and far between. But while the West was slowing down, the Far East was just getting started. In 1985, Mr. Vampire, a Hong Kong classic, introduced a whole new kind of undead terror, Jiangshi. If you remember, these are the stiff, hopping corpses from Chinese folklore that suck the life force out of the living. This film was a massive hit, solidifying the Jiangxi subgenre and spawning countless sequels and imitators throughout the late 80s and early 90s. Still, for a while, zombies just kind of faded into the background. Sure, they still existed, but they weren't the horror icons they had been in the 70s. That is, until a certain Japanese game company decided to resurrect the genre, and in the process, give us one of the most iconic zombie slayers of all time. That company? Capcom. That game? Resident Evil. In 1996, Capcom did something that would change the horror landscape forever. They unleashed Resident Evil upon the world. This game didn't just scare players. It reanimated zombies in pop culture, dragging them out of their shallow graves and back into the spotlight. Fun fact: Resident Evil wasn't originally going to be a zombie game. The developers initially planned for supernatural beings as the main enemies, but after drawing inspiration from Dawn of the Dead, they decided to go full zombie mode. So, congratulations, Romero! You officially set the standard for modern zombies. To Capcom's surprise, Resident Evil was a massive hit. It wasn't just a success in Japan. It became a global phenomenon. And with that success came sequels, spin-offs, and an entire franchise that would keep zombies at the forefront of horror for decades. But Resident Evil wasn't alone. Around the same time, Sega released The House of the Dead, another zombie-themed horror game. While House of the Dead gained a cult following, Resident Evil became the zombie game, overshadowing its competition. Its influence didn't stop at gaming either. Japanese zombie movies like Versus and Junk followed in its footsteps. One of Resident Evil's biggest contributions to the zombie genre was reinventing how zombies worked. Before this, zombies were mostly tied to supernatural origins, be it Haitian voodoo, ancient curses, or just because horror logic. But Resident Evil introduced the idea that zombies were the result of a virus, one that spreads through bites and scratches. This shift in zombie lore helped set the stage for a new wave of zombie media. Soon after, the early 2000s became a golden age for zombies in the media. We got Resident Evil, which was the first live-action adaptation of the game. We got Land of the Dead, which was another word to say Romero returning to the zombie phenomenon. And we also got 28 Days Later, which was a game-changer that introduced fast zombies. Speaking of 28 Days Later, this was one of the first films to introduce running zombies. And once audiences saw how terrifying a sprinting, rabid, bloodthirsty corpse could be, there was no going back. Games like Resident Evil had already played with faster zombie-like creatures, like zombie dogs and lickers, but now, the floodgates were open. Soon we had World War Z, Train to Busan, and The Last of Us. Also, the zombie niche itself has shown subtle changes by the mid-2000s, as by then, zombies weren't just about horror anymore. They got a comedic makeover. One of the best examples? The 2004 movie Shaun of the Dead. It still had the slow, flesh-eating monsters we all knew. But this time, the horror took a backseat to comedy. To be fair, zombies already had some comedic roots. Films like The Return of the Living Dead played with humor, but Shaun of the Dead pushed it to a new level. After that, zombies became fair game for all kinds of genres, including action, comedy, romance, and even anime. The 2010s and beyond introduced a new kind of zombie, the one that people actually simp over. That's right. Once terrifying monsters, zombies took a wild turn in the mid-2000s with comedic portrayals. But what came next? Well, imagine you meet someone drop-dead gorgeous, only to realize they're literally dead, but you still all over for them. Well, folks, welcome to the zombie romance era. Movies like Warm Bodies flipped the script, featuring a human girl simping for a hot zombie. Other films, like Burying the Ex and Life After Beth, followed suit, proving that even the undead can have dating problems. But that wasn't enough. Zombies didn't just infiltrate rom-coms, they stormed the anime industry, which is a realm where every fantasy can come true, including dating undead waifus. Enter Sankaria, an anime that ditches the whole rotting corpse aesthetic in favor of a 2D high school girl that everyone, including my brother, would probably simp over. That said, some anime did stick to the classic horror vibe, like High School of the Dead and Cabaneri of the Iron Fortress. So, while zombies were busy starring in romantic comedies, these animes still kept their horror roots alive. By the late 2010s, zombie media started slowing down. But like any horror franchise, zombies refuse to stay dead. Well, they're zombies, duh. The Far East, particularly Japan and South Korea, experienced their own zombie boom. Japan, even though they had their first zombie bloom in late 1990s, gave us hits like One Cut of the Dead and I Am a Hero in late 2010s. Meanwhile, South Korea went all in with films like Train to Busan, Alive, Rampant, and hit series like Kingdom and All of Us Are Dead. Even in the 2020s, zombies remain a horror staple, constantly mutating into new forms thanks to human creativity. That said, what's next then? We've seen zombies evolve from vengeful spirits to slave labor, from slow-moving flesh eaters to sprinting rage monsters, and even to romantic leads. But will they keep changing? Nicholas Barber from BBC basically says that zombie stories let us freak out about the end of the world without actually freaking out. Werewolves and vampires? Sure, they're scary, but they're not exactly wiping out humanity overnight. Zombies, though? They're the poster kids for total societal collapse. No rules, no order, just pure chaos. And to be honest, the world's always a hot mess, so as long as we've got existential dread, zombies aren't going anywhere. So, will zombies keep evolving? Will they become vegetarians? A solution to global warming? Or maybe a tool to scare your crazy ex into finally leaving you alone? Who knows? Let me know what you think in the comments. Also, this is my first video, so if this felt like a chaotic mess, well, sorry. Feel free to add anything I missed. This is your host, Salty Orca, signing out. See you next time!